Hello, all, and welcome to today's talk on evolutionary psychology. So, first and foremost, what is evolutionary psychology? Basically, it's the idea that evolution plays a role in humanity and how we change over the years. And the same thing that Charles Darwin was talking about with natural selection. So, some traits that we possess make it so it's more likely that we'll pass our genes on to the next generation. And basically, what we think is that the genes that were most likely to survive get passed down are ones that include some of the things that we have today as humans, like memory, perception, language, cognitive abilities, just to name a few. And the idea is our cognitive faculties and our personality and all these different pieces played a role in the likelihood that our ancestors would have survived. And it's important to note that all species are ever changing. So humans will continue to adapt and change their environment, and changes to our genetics will just occur through time. And the changes that are most adaptive will be the most likely to have their genes sent to the next generation. So, in this, going to talk a little bit about the role of evolution in aging. And first, it's important to point out that humans haven't always lived as long as they do now. And lifespans are still increasing throughout the world. In industrialized countries, they're increasing, starting to level out, and to some extent, actually starting to go down a little bit due to maybe processed food and sedentary lifestyles. However, in developing nations, due to medicine that's now available, people in general are just living longer than they ever had before. And as a result, what we see is that this age for older adults, there hasn't been a ton of work done on it at an evolutionary standpoint or at a societal standpoint, and it affects our lives today and our trajectories going forward. So the first thing that's noted in this paper here by Baltus is that evolutionary selection benefits decrease with age. So you can think about this from a couple different ways. So first is everybody lives through the younger adults if they are to make it to older adulthood. And it makes sense that constraints or different benefits with our genetics will play their course for younger adults, so they'll have a bigger role there. And what's also important to note is that after genes are passed from one generation to the next, basically those genes are already through. And things that happen to individuals after the genes are passed through don't have as large of an effect on their ability to create a new generation as that's already done. But it can still influence the following generation. So, for instance, after your genes are passed through, being a parent is incredibly important. Being a grandparent is totally important. But there's some things that happen later in life, namely dementia, that we consider to be somewhat selection neutral, meaning that natural selection doesn't really have the means to select against dementia, because dementia happens later in life to a point where genes are already passed on to the next generation by then. So evolution doesn't really affect it in the same way. So in general, the first point is just that evolution selection benefits, they tend to be less prominent as we get older. And the next one is that as we get older, we have an increased need for culture. So basically, you can think of it as compensation, that as we get older, we'll need maybe a little bit more help. It depends on our age and it depends on our trajectory. Many older adults don't really need help. They're doing really well. But as we enter into old age, there tends to be a time where we can use a little bit of help with different functioning in our daily life, whether it be doing our taxes, whether it be involving healthcare, whether it be help from kids or from caregivers. And anyway, just the need for culture tends to increase with age. Third, what we see is that overall culture seems to be less efficient for dealing with individuals who are getting older. And this could be for several reasons. One reason is just that, well, older adults, they haven't been around as long. There hasn't been as much work done on how to best deal with older adults. So it could have to do with that. Or it could be that different treatments that we have aren't necessarily made for older adults and they're more normed on younger adults. That could be something else too. But basically, big takeaways are that as we get older, evolution doesn't really have as firm of a grasp on assisting us as we get older. And we need to be more in touch with our culture as we get older, need more help. But the help that we get tends to be less and less efficient as we get older. And this is most true for those that are in their 80s and above. So Baltus calls this group the fourth age. And basically what he's talking about in this paper is that as culture, as a society, we need to build our technology around older adults and build our healthcare systems more so around older adults because people are living longer and it doesn't appear that as a society we've done quite enough for them. And yeah, those are the key points. I hope that you found this interesting. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Thank you and have a great day.